Philosophers talk to our times towards an ethnography of a self-poisoning mind, taking moments in capitalism. 100 years ago, my great-grandfather sold in 2 department stores which he owned reasonable furniture. And some of it actually wasn't that bad. When we moved to France, we got rid of the last of it. It was still very comfortable. It was just such a flame risk, it wasn't worth keeping. But central to his business was an offer that he made. He would kit out your house, he would say, with beds and sofas for the price of your demob pavement. Now, it had to be said, this was at a time, you see, of conscription. And men, when they left the army, he had noticed, always wanted to get married. And so he was going to kit out your marriage home for you with lovely cane furniture. Now, the furniture was not the stuff we kept in after years, let's put it that way. It wasn't of the total top-notch quality. It was kind of the MFI, really bad end of IKEA of its day. But he did it. He fulfilled a social need, which was cheap furniture, easily bought, and made a lot of money for it. His advertising slogan ran for about 30 years, all through the 20s, 30s and 40s. In the end, he quarrelled with the newspaper that carried most of his advertising, and they did an investigation of him and his business practices, and claimed the furniture was absolutely rubbish, which it wasn't. It was what you paid for. And eventually his shops closed. He sold them. He didn't make a huge loss. But here you have an archetypal, 1920s capitalist. He spied a hole in the market. That young men leaving the army want to kit out department stores. They want to kit out their house. And are looking for something really easy to do it. Don't want it too difficult. You could choose your colours, but that's what you could choose. And he fulfilled it. As such, he represents, if you like, the old-fashioned moment in capitalism. It still exists here. I suppose IKEA, in some form, still fulfill exactly that role for furniture. As people need furniture, and they don't always have the money to spend, there always is the role for that furniture that is slightly smaller than the claim, but fundamentally does what it says it does. At the same time as my great-grandfather, who I never knew, he died at the end of the 50s, I think 1956, was making his pile. Dorothy Sayers was writing the book Murder Must Advertise. And Murder Must Advertise clearly encaptures, I would say, the next stage of capitalism, what it then became. In that book, she has a very uncomfortable juxtapose between a cocaine ring, who are selling cocaine to the rich and to the famous. And that's illegal. It's an addictive drug. Everybody is against that. And an advertising firm. And the advertising firm is eminently respectable. And yet, it is selling products that effectively unpick people's lives. They sell them porridge, or porridge replacement, ready break, I think, of its day, that destroys their digestion. And then they sell the tablets that mend the digestion. And then they sell something that the tincture that allows you to taste those tablets. So they make a problem and then they solve a problem. And capitalism has moved. It's moved away from my great-grandfather selling relatively useful things that weren't quite as they said they were, to products that solved one problem by creating a next. And that created the next, and that created the next. I was talking yesterday about why drug companies are unpopular a bit. And this, of course, is one of the main reasons I think that drug companies are justifiably unpopular. Because you are given pills by doctors, and one pill leads to another. And as my father would say, and it always ends up in Senecots or castor oil, because you're either blocked one way or t'other. And Dorothy Sayers is making a very strong point about capitalism. Capitalism at that point had this false divide between products that were illegal, like cocaine, because they're addictive and criminal, and actual just capitalism itself, that deliberately got people hooked on certain products, and when they created problems, simply gave them another product to solve them. And so the entire thing went round and round in a spiral. This is, of course, at the time when the notion of advertising is shifting what it is. Freud, his brother-in-law, Berthes, starting to revolutionise advertising after the First World War in in America. So that what you're advertising is no longer the conscious mind, not the mind of my great-grandfather, who just was making a bargain with you. I'll kit out your house if you give me your DMOB payment. But rather a different sort of advertising that deliberately manufactured paranoia. So you have the marketing of cigarettes as somehow making you cool, and then the marketing of chewing gum because the breath smelt, and the invention of halitosis, for that matter, the invention of sweat as a social disease, the invention of body hair, all of these things which were always invented as all your friends are doing it, and they're all talking about you because you're not doing it. And so you get a different sort of psychological weaponization in order to sell products. Products are no longer your friends. They're the answer to the paranoia you didn't know you had until the product came along. And you're always caught in the paradox of the native African or South American hearing about Christianity for the first time. That if they don't hear about Christianity, they'll never be damned by a good God. But once they heard about it, they have to be Christian. So why on earth did the missionary ever explain it to them? And this is exactly the same problem. If you don't know about body odour, it doesn't occur to you as a problem. It only occurs to you a problem because somebody's told you it's a problem and everybody's talking about it and worrying about it. I live in one of the things about where I live deep in the mountains of France is actually nobody bothers with perspiration. And to be honest with you, you don't notice. It really doesn't matter. You could say it matters more in cities. Maybe there aren't that many cities here. I might buy a bit of that. But fundamentally, like halitosis, it was invented. It was invented as a paranoia, a fear. But still, something isn't happening. What isn't happening is the cocaine line isn't being crossed. Illnesses are being invented, but the fundamental difference between the drug trade and advertising, that it is chemically non-addictive, it is being respected. And yet, and Dorothy Sayers in Murder Must Advertise is a cunning enough author to point out, in the end, the good capitalist is clearly the cocaine merchant, because he is selling things that make you utterly addicted to them. And so it was only perhaps a matter of time before capitalism's more dark phase emerged. And of course, that emerged with the entire story. I think I would merge it with the story and discovery, the marketing of dopamine and its like. Once you understand that, let me get this exactly right. It is not that dopamine didn't exist before it was discovered or uncovered. That's of course not right. But what it wasn't was a major problem for humanity, because there weren't things that were deliberately getting you addicted to it. But with the invention, probably I think, of fast food, so food that gave you an immediate hit and then suddenly unsatisfied you, and yet was strangely addictive, something queer was happening to human reason. And so, in a sense, I probably would argue, before the mobile phone, capitalism stumbled across its own version of cocaine. It stumbled across it in little products that were all glitz and all glamour, that gave you an immediate hit, but no ultimate satisfaction. So that it meant that you had to go back and do it again, and do it again. This was the law, of course, of cigarettes. It was that moment of break during the day, which is why people kept on smoking, why they do keep on smoking. While here, in the deep south of France, people do smoke because they're wanting the break in their day. But it was something else. It was the little adrenaline hit in your day. And by, what are we going to say, by the 90s, early 2000s, certainly products were being designed to give you that immediate hit. And with the phones and with the mention of applications, it of course becomes an absolutely addictive drug. So that products are of course now manufactured not to be any good. They don't have to be. Not to so they don't have to be even as good as my great grandfather's furniture. Nor even to answer a paranoia you didn't know you had, because it doesn't need to make a paranoia. It's far more addictive than that. What it of course does is it uses your brain chemistry to get you addicted to its own product. It is, if you like, the version, and the reason why this is so dangerous obviously for humans, because it shifts human brains so that they become product consuming machines. And there are limits to this process. And one of the fascinating things is watching where the limit is. So if you do it too much and too obviously, the exposés hit and go, well, we don't like them anymore. They're just too obvious. You get it with fast food. The scam has become too damn obvious. You get it also with ultra-processed food. The scam, once you're out of it, is too damn obvious. All the dopamine-fueled junkies, if they push it too much, then people break the chain. This is the world of the cocaine dealer, of course. If you push it too hard, then people see what you're doing and they just take it. They have to be allowed to go to it and get addicted on their own. And humans, of course, will do that perfectly comfortably. And that, of course, shifts the entire way the society organizes. Because what you actually want to do is to get a group of people addicted to whatever it is that you sell it. And you become not about the capitalism of my great-grandfather, but rather the capitalism of addiction, where we are all caught up in our own versions of the unsound cocaine seller in Murder Must Advertise, and all caught up by it. You have those apps you must just look at. You have those memories you must just consult. I always imagine like Slithers. Is it Christian Andersen about a heart of glass that pierces the heart of a young boy, the Snow Queen? And I always imagine that these are just like little hearts of glass, moments, slithers of glass, frozen ice that freeze our hearts, that mean we have to do this thing at this time, or at this time, or at this time, that destroy an impossibility then of free will as we follow our next dopamine hit. And of course, we invented a science that understands it. We invent the entire psychology of brain chemistry that both understands it, allows it to be orchestrated while warning against it. And one of the curious things about this version of capitalism is that it knows it's addictive. It is like the drug pusher. And yet, like the drug pusher, he's like a drug pusher who's also saying, well, we know this is bad, but this is how you would do it if you want it to be bad. And so people are bad, and they do it. And then we have no apparent way, because all our ways to limit it are either flawed, because they're going to be controlled by those organisations, I mean politicians, who've got a vestige interest in allowing dopamine hits to carry on, because they could actually earn power that way. And so what we do is the most threadbare of all appeals to human choice, and say, well, we could all make choices if in the end, like we were some kind of evangelical priest. Like the poor men who were being demobbed that my great-grandfather scammed out of their money. He didn't really scam them. Out of the demob payments, had a choice. They needed to furnish a house. This was a way of doing it. And so we use the most threadbare of ideas, human choice, against this deliberate manipulation of human psychology. More than that, of course, it destroys the heart of businesses. My great-grandfather certainly wasn't a corporation. He was a one-man band. He was running what he was running. But the minute you have corporations, so collective responsibility that is all about numbers and sales pitch, that don't really care about the product, you have the perfect engine for driving product based on dopamine hits. Because dopamine hits directly translate into cash. And so you have organisations where there is no real responsibility beyond a bottom line and a debt to a set of shareholders. There's no responsibility to the people they're selling to. They really are drug pushers. The unsound drug pushers of murderers must advertise who are prepared to kill anyone in order to keep their ring going. And capitalism has crossed what I would call the Dorothy Sayers line between actual addiction and merely good advertising. And our problem is, in a world where things are utterly complicated, where we live in an environment that is shifting beyond any sort of control, where we elect mad baboons with no brain in charge of superpowers, how on earth do we deal with this additional problem that we've got ourselves hooked to our own version, to products that are to the products of capitalism, and are unable to easily pull ourselves away from the shining gewgaws in our pockets in order to concentrate long enough to solve the mess that we have made?